I've decided on a rather leisurely start to my day out today, a little gentle cruising. This isn't a river, by the way, but a canal, 11 miles long and dug out by the Romans nearly 2,000 years ago. It's known as the Fosdyke and leads from the River Trent to the River Witham and to my destination today, the city of Lincoln. Taking me there is boatman Bill Walters. Bill, how deep's the canal?
Approximately 5 to 6 feet. In average depth all over, you know, 5 to 6 feet.
When you consider the Romans had no machines to help them build it, it really was a terrific feat of engineering.
Tremendous engineering job, isn't it? When you think about it. It must have taken many, many man-hours. Many man-hours.
But was it always this size?
No, it's obviously been deepened and widened over a period of time.
The Romans were wise enough to realise that by joining the two rivers they could create an excellent inland waterway stretching from the North Sea right through to the north of England. Their foresight made Lincoln a centre for trade and commerce, which was to be of vital importance to the city's prosperity. But those days are long gone, and the only traffic today seems to be pleasure craft.
Mainly pleasure craft, yes.
Just looking at the banks, it's terribly marshy around here, isn't it?
Yes, there's very little agricultural takes place in this area. A bit of willows grown on the far bank there for basket making, but other than that it's just pure marshland.
What's this coming up ahead?
We're just entering Brayford Pool. This years ago all the big grain barges used to come down here to the warehouses. On your right hand side you've got the Lincoln Marina, the boatyard.
So it's just purely pleasure craft now?
A lot of pleasure boats now, yes, yes. No commercial traffic at all.
Was the pool always this size?
No, years ago it would be probably twice its size. It's been reclaimed most of the land roundabout. If you go to the museums and see the DeWitt paintings, you'll see that the Brayford must have been much larger for the amount of shipping it was on it at its time. Much larger.
Brayford Pool is much older than Fosdyke. In fact, it's partly responsible for Lincoln's name. The first syllable, lin, derives from the Celtic for pool or lake. When the Romans arrived, they made the town a colonia, a centre for retired centurions. And over the years, Linden Colonia has shortened to present-day Lincoln. From the pool, you get an excellent view of Lincoln's most famous landmark, the cathedral, set high on Lincoln Edge in the upper part of the city. The pool flows into the River Witham, and spanning it ahead of us is the High Bridge, better known for some inexplicable reason to the locals as the Glory Hole. Originally, there'd have been a Roman timber bridge on this site, but today the timber-framed house is 16th century and the bridge is Norman in origin, and an amazing 800 years old. Nothing more bracing on a fresh morning than a little boat trip. Is this fairly central here, Bill?
Yes, within the marketplace on the right-hand side now, look.
Oh, yeah, I'll drop off here then, if I may.
Yes, I'll put you alongside this wall here, look.
Good. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
With the river running through the city centre and High Bridge above it, the area has a flavour of Venice about it. Over there to the south of the river is the market area, and I'm assured that trading's been going on here ever since the Vikings raided and settled the area some 1100 years ago. So that's quite good going, isn't it? Now, what's he selling from that barge? Let's go and find out. Jeff Hewitt, I think this is the first time I've ever seen a floating shop.
Well, there's not many about in the country. There's not many at all. I think there's only about 2 or 3. We're the only people in Lincoln. Family has been here since, 1919. Stemming right back from the old days when they used to come up from a boat from Boston, sell the wares of fish and then take coal back to Boston.
So it was a two-way trade?
It was a two-way trade for them, yes. Obviously nowadays we're stationed here and that doesn't go on now, of course.
So your forerunners were fishermen, were they?
Yes, my father-in-law and all his 6 brothers, they were all fishermen. They used to fish from Boston. As I said then, bring the wares up to Lincoln, sell the wares and then take coal back.
So where does your shellfish come from these days?
Comes from all over the country. Crabs from a place called Eyemouth in Scotland. They're transported by road live. We pick them up from Grimsby live and bring them to Lincoln and boil them, cook them, dress them, and from there onto the boat and away we go.
Looks marvellous.
That's very nice of you. We
What-
tried to make it look nice anyway.
What a spread.
Well, there's a lot to eat all in one go.
By the Middle Ages, Lincoln's wealth was due mainly to the wool trade. The wool was brought downriver from the Midlands to the wealthy Lincoln merchants, and several of their houses still stand by the water's edge. With the arrival of so much wool, a flourishing cloth industry grew up here. And after all, Lincoln Green's world famous is the garb of Robin Hood and his merry men. Today, of course, the wool trade is long gone, and the river plays no part in the city's commerce. But Lincoln is still a busy centre, as the hustle and bustle of the market area proves. As a visitor, it's so pleasant to be able to walk freely along the streets. The high street's a pedestrian area, and it gives you the opportunity to take in the sights and the feel of the city without risking life and limb. I only wish more of our towns and cities would follow Lincoln's example. Ahead of me is the Stone Bow, the south gate of the medieval city, and also the site of one of the Roman gates. And above it, the Guildhall, where the council gather. For the locals, though, Stone Bow is a favourite meeting spot, and you'll often overhear them say, "See you under the Stone Bow at such and such a time." Before the street was made into a pedestrian area, it carried all the traffic in and out of Lincoln through the Guildhall archway, and it must have been chaotic. Apparently, the worst problem was caused by double-decker buses, which had to be guided through by a policeman. And I bet there were some very near misses. On the roof of the Guildhall is the Moat Bell. It dates from 1371 and is the oldest in the country. It was used to summon the town councillors to meetings and can be heard all over the city. It was rung for 5 minutes before a meeting commenced with a single toll, and for the last minute, a double toll as an extra warning to them all to hurry up and not be late. And it's still used to summon the councillors today. From the Guildhall, the High Street continues upwards towards the cathedral and the older part of the city. I must say, you really need to go into training for this climb, and it's not to be recommended for veterans. I'm gradually making my way up Steep Hill, very appropriately called, which links the lower part of Lincoln with the upper. But to make up for this steepness, there are lots of interesting houses to look at and fascinating shops to gaze into as you huff and puff your way to the top. It's also worth mentioning that most of Steep Hill is closed to traffic, so at least while you struggle to the top, you don't have to contend with traffic as well as a racing pulse. Oh, at last the top. Castle Square and the castle itself. At the time of the Norman conquest in 1066, Lincoln was a thriving town, second in size only to London. So in 1068, William the Conqueror, realising the importance of such a commercial centre, ordered the building of a castle to protect the area. The Conqueror was clearly no respecter of the past. The site chosen was on top of the remaining Roman walls. Mind you, it was the perfect spot, commanding the surrounding district, and of course, what better foundations than those of a well-constructed Roman fort. In later times, the castle's original role as a stronghold to keep people out changed dramatically. It became a place to keep people in, a prison. And those who died in prison or were executed for their crimes ended their days here, buried in the original castle keep. So you can see that even in death, they were still behind stone walls. All that marks their last resting places are these simple headstones. There are no names on them, just initials. WFH, April 1872. PB, December 1868. JW 1849, and so on up and down each line. One extraordinary feature of the prison is the chapel, the only surviving example of its type in the world. The idea was that each prisoner was locked into one of these individual high-sided pews. From here he could see the chaplain, but however hard he looked, none of his fellow inmates. The women used to sit down there at the front, the murderers in the middle, and the lesser felons up there at the back. And in reverse, the chaplain had a clear view of each prisoner in his boxed-in compartment. It makes you wonder how long the sermons used to go on for. After all, what a temptation for the chaplain when before him he had such a captive audience. From the battlements of the castle, you can see the top of a windmill further along Lincoln Edge. It's within comfortable walking distance and well worth a visit, having been fully restored to working order in the past few years. It's known as Ellis's Mill, the name of a previous owner, but today it's lovingly cared for and worked by Barry Brooks.
The tower was built in 1798 and was one of 8 along the Lincoln Edge. The mill was in use until the 1940s, when the then miller, Frank Ellis, took it out of use but continued to use it as a woodyard. In 1973 the mill changed hands, and in 1974 a fire occurred that completely burnt out the remains of the mill.
So this has been restored?
Yes, fully restored. If you'd come here in 1974 it would have just been like the inside of a chimney. Lincoln Civic Trust acquired the site in 1977, and making use of the old job creation scheme, 3 teams of 6 lads, under the supervision of a foreman, undertook the basic restoration of the mill.
So is it fair to say that there's a growing interest in windmills?
Oh, there's a considerable interest in mills. I think virtually any tower at the moment that's worth restoring, some enthusiast is doing something to it. The grain drops into the eye of the stone where the centrifugal force throws it out into the stationary bed furrow. The running furrow passes over any grain that stood proud in the bed furrow and smashes it off and carries that mixture onto what we call the lands. That's the flats alongside the furrows. And there, the abrasive action of the stone rubs on that mixture and further reduces it to a meal until finally it's thrown off by the same centrifugal force, carried round the outside edge of the stone to the chute hole, drops down the chute hole to the sacks on the ground floor.
Well, Ellis's Mill might be in full working order today, but there's lots more restoration work going on in Lincoln. Here at Ruston's Turbine Company, they're busy restoring a rather unusual object, which was invented here in Lincoln during the First World War, and which changed the whole course and strategy of modern warfare. Here it is, a Mark IV tank used in the Battle of Cambrai in 1917 and nicknamed Flirt. Flirt, along with many others, was made by Foster's Engineering, who specialised in caterpillar tracking. Their secret code name was Water Carriers for Mesopotamia, but the girls who made them soon nicknamed them tanks, and as we all know, the nickname stuck. It was at Cambrai that their true worth was realised. For months, the front line had remained static, but on November the 20th, 1917, the British advanced 25 miles, and the tank's future was assured. Straddling across Ermine Street is Newport Arch, the remaining part of the Roman north gate to the city. And when you look at it today, it's amazing how it's managed to withstand nearly 2,000 years of wear and tear, bumps and scrapes, and modern-day traffic fumes. It was here in Lincoln that 2 famous Roman roads met, the Fosse Way and Ermine Street, so many travellers must have passed under the Newport Arch over the centuries. Originally, the archway was much larger. You see, the Roman road level was at least 7 feet lower than today's, so it must have been very impressive. With so many reminders of the Roman occupation, It's not surprising, perhaps, that close to the arch, an archaeological dig is in progress. Kevin Cammage, you're in charge of operations here. What are you excavating?
We're excavating a Roman well at the site of the old church of St. Paul in the Vale.
Did this supply all the water for the area?
Certainly, originally, it would have supplied the water for the military headquarters of Lincoln, the Principia, which was just behind you.
How deep is it, or will it be?
We estimate that it'll be about 50 feet deep from modern ground level.
Now, a well seems an unusual sort of thing to want to excavate.
Yes, the main reason we're excavating the well is that the finds, which we hope will be at the bottom of this well, will be beneath the water table, and thus organic material, such as leather, wood, fabric, which normally decomposes on an archaeological excavation, will be perfectly preserved, we hope, at the bottom.
It must have been quite an operation for the Romans to dig this.
They've smashed their way straight through solid limestone bedrock to get to the water. We're somewhat luckier in only having to remove 17th century earth, which was chucked down there when the well went out of use.
From the Roman well, it's only a short walk back to the castle square and the beautiful cathedral. It's dominated the city and the surrounding countryside since its construction began in 1072 at the instigation of William the Conqueror. Some of the original Norman architecture has survived here at the West Front, but the cathedral of today is a mixture of many architectural styles. At the end of the great transept are two beautiful stained glass windows. The Dean's Eye to the north is over 750 years old, but the colours are as bright and fresh as ever. Opposite is the Bishop's Eye, not quite as old, but certainly as lovely. This is a novel idea, I think. A display for the blind so that they can actually get the feel of the cathedral. All these items on display are marked out individually in Braille. So you can run your fingers along and find that this is stone as it arrives for repair work straight from the quarry. And this is a piece of decayed medieval stone taken down from the cathedral. And here's a piece of lead sheeting stripped from the roof. And of course, this piece of timber decayed by the dreaded Death Watch beetle. The cathedral has been a welcome landmark for many travellers over the years, but in particular for the Air Force squadrons returning to their Lincolnshire bases during the Second World War. One can imagine their delight as they saw the cathedral below them and realised they'd made it safely home, which is why the image of the cathedral in the stained glass is seen from above. One chap you have to see in the cathedral is the Lincoln Imp. Legend has it that long ago 2 imps paid a visit here. One fluttered around outside, but one was bold enough to fly inside, and he landed on top of the pillar there. For his transgressions, he was turned immediately to stone. But I think you'll agree that's something of a fairy story. He's not the easiest person to find, nor particularly attractive when you do. The imp seems to have been little known until the end of the last century. It was a local jeweller, James Ward Usher, obviously an astute businessman, who realised the potential of using him as a sales gimmick. He registered a patent for the imp and made all sorts of jewellery, including imp tie-pins, cufflinks, brooches and spoons. And even today, many people who know little about the city have heard of the Lincoln Imp. Just outside the cathedral in the Minster Yard are some fine Georgian houses called the number houses, because they were the first in Lincoln to be given street numbers. From the Minster Yard on the south of the cathedral are the ruins of the old Bishop's Palace. And it's here in the palace grounds that I've arranged to meet Chris Brewer. He looks after and is going to show me around Lincoln's very own vineyard. Hello, Chris.
Oh, good morning.
Hello. What are you doing, the pruning?
Just the extra growth, cutting it away so all the juice can go to the correct vines.
Do they take a lot of looking after?
They take a lot of constant care, yes. Spraying during the summer to keep the pests away.
Has Lincoln always had a tradition of making and producing its own wine?
Well, this vineyard was planted in 1972. It was to commemorate the 900th anniversary of the cathedral. But there have been stories of a Roman vineyard in Lincoln, but of yet I've not found any evidence.
No proof of it?
No.
This is a proper little sun trap, isn't it? It catches everything. But how do the vines do this far north?
If they get the constant sunshine like we have today, then they do fairly well, but they've got to have plenty. We've only had 2 vintages off this vineyard, 1976 when we had the super summer, and last year.
And how many bottles do you get from this?
From last year's we had 60 bottles. We lost a lot through the birds, eating the grapes, this sort of thing.
And what's the quality like?
I've yet to find out because last year's we haven't yet tasted.
Haven't you got a little bottle we could perhaps...
Well, yes, I have a bottle somewhere. We'll go and try it.
OK. Good. And yours? That's mine. Very good health.
Prost.
What do you think of that?
It's still a little young, but I think it's got great promise.
Slightly musty, isn't it?
Just a little, yes, just a little there, but I think with age, I think this one will get a little better.
And a slight pinkish tinge to it, have you noticed?
Yes, some of the grapes here are a red grape, and although the skins are taken out, it still just leaves that hint of red in the wine.
Right. Well, where would you suggest, Chris, I take a look at that next?
Well, I think the ideal place is straight down there to the Usher Art Gallery. Some fascinating items in there.
Good. I'll just finish this first.
Yeah, a good idea.
And after that refreshing glass of wine, here I am at the Usher Gallery. Now, the name may ring a bell with you, and so it should. You see, the finance for this building came from James Ward Usher, the man who made the Lincoln Imp so famous. Well, it also made him very rich. Apart from making jewellery and clocks, James Usher was also a fervent collector and amassed an extraordinary selection of watches, miniatures, porcelain and silver. With no legitimate heir to his estate, he bequeathed his collection to the city, along with the funds for a building to house them. And so, in May 1927, the Usher Gallery was opened by the Prince of Wales. The gallery's curator today is Richard Wood.
The collection as such is a splendid collection, mainly English and French, and 2 or 3 items are worthy of note. There's a very nice miniature portrait of Lord Byron by Francis Hargreaves, dated about 1820, which has in fact a piece of hair in the back of the frame. And there are 2 other pieces. There's a rather nice one of Napoleon Bonaparte. Usher was particularly interested in portraits of notable people, and indeed another one of Mary Queen of Scots by, or after, Andrew Lenz, painted about 1740.
And that's in a ring.
Yes, a very splendid ring it is as well.
This is a particularly fine collection of watches. They number about 60, and they cover the period roughly about 1600 right the way through to 1900, and are particularly fine.
Did he pay a fortune for many of these pieces?
No, he didn't, in fact. We have records to show that he never paid more than about £75 for any item in the original Usher bequest. But of course now they're worth considerably more.
What are the prize pieces?
Well, there are about 4 or 5 pieces that are particularly interesting. The first is one by Lewis Ferron, a London maker of about 1760, and is particularly fine because it is a chased gold case and is set with rubies, diamonds and moss agate plaques. Particularly fine. It's a quarter repeater, so inside we have an inner case which is also pierced to enable the sound from the chiming bell to come forward.
Some of them were just as ornate inside.
Yes, indeed there were. The workmanship was particularly fine of this period, and the English and French schools of watchmakers were particularly comparable. The second piece is what we call a form watch, and in this particular case it is in the shape of a mandolin, an enamelled gold case set with seed pearls, and you can see the mechanism through the sound hole in the middle, and then if we press the button at the back, in the back of the watch we have the face and the mechanism. The third piece, a piece made by William Ilbery of London about 1820 for the Chinese market, and is a duplex movement watch and has a particularly fine enamel. The enamel is by DuPont.
Painted by hand, of course.
Oh yes, indeed, yes. And the fourth piece is our earliest piece, in fact, dated about 1599, a calendar clock with alarm, and it has the hours running around the outer ring, and then in the centre we have the phases of the moon. This is particularly interesting because it was in fact reputedly to belong to James I.
The gallery also houses some splendid paintings, including the De Wint collection that Bill Walters mentioned at the start of our day out. For most of the year, the cathedral's floodlit, and it's always worth hanging on for those few extra hours until darkness falls to see it in all its medieval glory. And so it's goodbye to Lincoln, one-time seat of the Romans, the home of Lincoln Green, and of course, not forgetting, birthplace of the tank. Good night.